Hi, Justin. Hi, Rose. I'm glad you're both here. You're welcome to do that. This recording will also be transcribed uh, professionally and posted on our YouTube channel. So for folks who would like captions when they watch it, those will be available. I'm also going to make sure that I am showing the speaker view for the recording because some of us don't necessarily want to be viewed by people when they're when we're recording. So I have gallery view off. And with that, I'm going to stop talking and turn it over to our host, Disability Services Coordinator, Carolyn Levine. Welcome, Carolyn.
Thank you so much. I appreciate y'all joining me. Again, my name is Carolyn Levine. I'm the new Disability Services Coordinator here at Blue Ridge. And the presentation I have for you today is just a general overview of disability services. But before I get started, I wanted to kind of open the floor and see if anybody had any specific questions or topics they wanted to talk about today. No? Okay. Well, then we're going to start with the basics. What is a disability? We are most concerned with the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA's definition of a person with a disability, because that is the federal law that covers post-secondary institutions like Blue Ridge Community College. And according to the ADA, a person with a disability is someone who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. I think the most important thing about this is that there's not a set list of disabilities that the ADA recognizes. There's not a list of disabilities they don't recognize. So it really just depends on not so much the diagnosis, but how that diagnosis impacts that person's ability to function, to learn, to carry on activities of daily living, those kind of things. I'm a visual person, so I have this photo. Some disabilities are visible, some are not. Most of the time, the disabilities that you see are going to look like this bottom picture. They're what we call invisible disabilities. And I think sometimes those are the hardest because we can't see it, so we don't know what's going on. None of us are mind readers, so we don't know what a student may or may not have going on. But hopefully, this presentation will help a little bit in working with those students, even if you're not 100% sure what they may or may not have going on. Another thing I like to touch on is person first language. A lot of y'all are probably familiar with this already, but again, person first language just emphasizes the person, not the disability. So we don't want to define someone by their disability. We don't want to say that person is autistic or they're schizophrenic. We want to say they're a person with autism, a person with schizophrenia. Just like we say that person has blonde hair, we don't want to say, oh, they're a blonde, because that's not the only thing that defines them, right? And of course, we want to avoid using terms like handicap, crippled, retarded. Please don't ever use those. Ever. Not that you would, but. All right, so this is a list of laws that are relevant to accommodations and students with disabilities in post-secondary education. I have a little overview slide for each one, and each of these are hyperlinked if you wanted to read like the full law. That's there for you, but I am not going to read through every single one of these. But again, this PowerPoint will be shared. There's a little overview of each law on these slides, but the one I did want to talk about specifically is Section 504 and the Americans with Disabilities Act, because those have the most implications for instructors and folks working in higher education. And the main takeaways from those two laws that I think are important to remember are those who've qualified for admissions have the right to be in higher education. Once admitted, students have the right to access academic and non-academic programs. Qualified students are eligible to receive academic and accommodations. And students have the right to confidentiality to all disability information. And like Blue Ridge, most institutions require students to disclose their disability themselves. We don't take on the burden of identifying students with disabilities. So in a nutshell, what that means is we want you to treat students with disabilities just like everyone else. So we don't ever want to say a student can't take this class or isn't going to be successful in this profession because they have XYZ disability. That's not for us to decide. We are here to give them a chance just like everyone else, and whether they succeed or fail is up to them. So again, this is just some overviews of those laws that were listed a couple slides ago. So more specifically about accommodations at a college level, again, we're looking at the functional impact of the disability, not necessarily the diagnosis itself. And the accommodations may vary depending on the class and the requirements for that class. So regardless of the accommodation, I can't approve anything that would fundamentally alter the course or the requirements. So we can't modify exams, we can't modify coursework, we can't waive requirements. So there may be some accommodations that apply in some classes and not others. When I write accommodation letters, they're for the student's entire academic career at Blue Ridge. Now, how those accommodations work in each class may vary. So if you ever get an accommodation letter and you're like, I'm not sure how that's going to work in my class, let me know, because I don't obviously know everything. I don't know how all of your classes are set up. And so some of the accommodations are written a little bit more vaguely so that interpretation, we have some wiggle room there when we're implementing those. Big difference for students in college when it comes to accommodations is that accommodations in college require equal access, not success. So if they got accommodations in high school, they might be used to things working under the IDEA, and that is a totally different law, totally different system. They can do a lot more in K-12 as far as ensuring students succeed, versus in college, they have to meet the same requirements as everybody else. They have to get from point A to point B. Now, how they get from point A to point B might be a little different, and that's where their accommodations come in. But students have to self-disclose. We don't get notified by school. They have to come to my office or call me or email me. They don't have to physically come to my office, but they do have to contact me. I like this little visual. I think it's a good example of equality versus equity, and it makes it a little easier to wrap your head around what our goal is when it comes to accommodations and leveling the playing field. So what may seem like an advantage for one student is actually leveling the playing field for another student. So again, we're looking at everyone having different circumstances, and we want to allocate the resources needed to reach an equal outcome, or the chance to reach an equal outcome. So again, we're not guaranteeing success, but we are guaranteeing that they have the same chance to succeed or fail as anyone else. If you've ever received an accommodation letter for a student, which I imagine most of you have, you've probably seen a lot of these accommodations. Some of these accommodations are going to have an attachment that explain it in more detail. So things like makeup work, flexibility in attendance, note takers, reporting lectures, especially these two, makeup work and flexibility in attendance. They have some pretty lengthy attachments that explain exactly how those work, because they're not meant to just be, students have unlimited absences or automatically have extra time on all of their assignments. It's for specific situations, and it goes into detail about how to approach that with students. Working with students that are deaf and hard of hearing, I like to include this because, as I mentioned, with the implications for 504 and ADA, we want students to participate fully in their academic journey, whether that be clubs, sporting events, anything involved in school other than classes, and of course including classes. So if you have a student that requires an interpreter, make sure that you let my office know, and we will provide interpreters for those students. They don't need to bring their own. If anyone is a program chair or is over any budgeting, this office, Student Services, pays for interpreter services. They don't come out of individual program budgets, just FYI. Some assistive technology that some of your students might be using. They might be using FM systems for sound amplification, recording lectures, using microphones. Most students are going to use their laptops or their phones. Screen readers. If you've ever had a student that had to read aloud as an accommodation for testing, this is what we're talking about. We don't actually have a person read the test aloud. We have them use a screen reader. The college has Snap and Read. And then there's another one that I like to use called NVDA. Both are free. Both are good options. It really just depends on the student and what they're comfortable with. Students are probably also, if they're using read aloud or a screen reader for tests, they're probably also using a screen reader at home to read their textbooks. They may also be using dictation software. or they may need captions and transcripts for all of their videos, which if you ever need help getting transcripts or captions for videos, let us know. All right, creating accessible content. So again, you guys probably have seen a lot of this already, but we want to make sure that all of your pictures have alt text, but we don't want to have pictures of text. Make sure all of your videos have captions and podcasts have transcripts. Making sure your tables are accessible and headers are used in all of your documents. Maintain accessibility when you save as a PDF or convert to any other format. So in my little example here, we have this is really important, written 5 different ways, one of which is accessible and 4 that are not accessible. One at the bottom, this one. This is the accessible one. Yay! So we want to avoid, fonts that are really curly and scripty and color contrast that might not work so well together, might be hard to read for students with visual impairments, and also for screen readers, sometimes it can be hard to read these kind of fonts. So as far as responsibilities, and if any of you guys have gotten an accommodation letter this semester, you should see that I've added a responsibilities legend to those accommodation letters. And so next to each accommodation, it'll have a key that says who's responsible for providing said accommodation. And I'm hoping that makes things just a little clearer for folks. But if it doesn't, if it makes it more confusing, please let me know. I'm always open to feedback. But students, their responsibilities, they have to register with my office. So they can tell you all day long that they had accommodations in high school and they need this and they need that. You are not obligated to provide any accommodations unless you receive an accommodation letter from my office. And if they insist that they do need these accommodations, just direct them to me and I'll take it from there. But it is important to know that accommodations are not retroactive. So if a student waits until halfway through the semester to register with disability services, their accommodations are only going to be active from the time they register moving forward. It's not going to apply to any of the tests that they've already taken or any of the assignments they've already completed. It's also up to the student to talk to their instructors and let them know how each accommodation will be provided. So read aloud, for example, that's one where they would need to talk to you and let you know, I like to use this screen reader for my tests and make sure that it's compatible with whatever testing software you're using and that it's installed on the computer they're using. Sometimes IT might have to download those if they're using a school computer. They also need to remind you each time an accommodation is needed. So it is not your responsibility to automatically put anything in place for them. If you do, that's wonderful. Kudos to you, but you don't have to. I tell all of my students, if you don't say anything to your instructors, they're just going to assume that you didn't want to use your accommodations for this particular test or assignments. And that is their prerogative. I have some students that only use their accommodations for final exams. Some students use their accommodations for every single test, every quiz, every assignment. And again, it's up to the student how and when they want to use those accommodations. So your responsibilities as faculty and staff is to provide those accommodations for students with documented disabilities, and you will get an accommodation letter from me at the beginning of each semester for students that are registered and receiving accommodations. If they register with my office later in the semester, then obviously you would get the letter later on. But if they've already been registered, then you should get that letter on the first day of class. Again, it is up to you if you want to provide accommodations without receiving accommodation letters. I think for consistency's sake, it's better not to, and just to redirect students to my office, because we don't want to act like we're playing favorites or, if we do it for one person, then we've got to do it for everyone, right? And that's a slippery slope. Students with disabilities, of course, are covered under FERPA. So please don't ever say anything in front of the class that would indicate that a student is receiving accommodations. That's no one's business but theirs. So if you need to talk to them about their accommodations, you want to have that conversation in private, email them. Obviously not something you want to bring to the attention of the class. Okay, more about confidentiality. So my office cannot disclose any disability-related information without written consent from the student. So I like to share this slide and talk about this slide mostly because I want to ask you guys to trust me. So there may be times when there's a student's behavior that may seem a little off, or you're wondering why on earth do they have these accommodations, or why don't they have accommodations? And if you call me with a question and I give you what sounds like a sketchy answer, this is why. It's because there's only so much that I can share, and I'm going to try to tell you as much as I can without violating that student's right to confidentiality. So I ask you to please, please trust me, and that if a student's receiving an accommodation, I have documentation on file that justifies them receiving that accommodation. And once again, my office will email accommodation letters to instructors on the first day of class each semester. More about faculty rights. Again, you're not required to provide an accommodation without receiving the student's accommodation letter. So if a student is telling you that they should receive a particular accommodation, but it's not on their letter, redirect them to my office, because you don't have to provide anything that's not listed on there. You do have the right to challenge an accommodation if you feel the student is not qualified. That being said, please, please, please don't bring this up with a student until you speak with me. That could result in an OCR situation. And once again, I'm asking you to please trust me that I have appropriate documentation on file for that student to receive the accommodations that they are receiving. And a lot of times their disability may not be obvious. And you may think, why on earth do they need this? You know, they're fine. They don't have a disability. Again, please trust me. Yes, they do. You also have the right to request a written agreement before allowing a student to tape record a class. You can have your own agreement for your purposes if you want to, but know that students with this accommodation do sign an agreement with my office that I keep on file. And this is a big one too. So regardless of a student's disability status or accommodations, they are expected to adhere to the behavior conduct policy of the college. I think that's really important, especially when we're working with students who maybe have some emotional outbursts or maybe some inappropriate interactions with other students. It doesn't matter what their diagnosis is, they still have to conduct themselves like every other student. Again, faculty and staff are not responsible for ensuring that a student does well in their class just because they have a disability. You just have to guarantee they have the same opportunity to succeed or fail. You're also not expected to be experts on disabilities or accommodations. This comes up a lot with students who had accommodations in K-12 because all of their instructors knew why they had accommodations. They knew their whole history, their academic history, their disability history, and they're used to things just being put in place. Everybody knows everything about them. That's not how it works in college. That's not your job. So it is okay to ask a student how an accommodation should be provided. If you're not sure, ask them. The only thing you're not supposed to ask them is why they receive an accommodation, or ask them what their diagnosis is. Please don't ever ask them that. You can ask them for a copy of their letter, and you can ask them, again, how an accommodation should be provided. If you're not sure, you can reach out to them. If you're not comfortable reaching out to the student, reach out to me. I'm here as a resource for faculty and staff as well as students. I know sometimes it can be nerve-wracking. We don't want to say the wrong thing. We don't want to upset someone, but there is no wrong question that you can ask me. So if you're not sure if it's appropriate, ask that question to me, because you're not going to get in trouble if you ask me. If you ask the student, you might. So please, when in doubt, just ask me. Okay, I'm not going to read through all of these. Hopefully you guys are doing a lot of this already. These are just some general tips for making your class more accessible. And of course, a couple things to not do. Again, I'm assuming you guys are not doing this because you're all amazing, wonderful teachers, and you would never ever do this to a student.
Hey, Carolyn,
Yes.
I actually think it would be really helpful if you walk through some of these. Because I don't think they're super obvious. Do you mind?
Oh, no, of course. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. We have plenty of time. We're good. I think these are really important.
Okay. Well then, yes, I would love to talk about these. First one is to add an accessibility statement to your course syllabus. So that just means having a little blurb about accommodations, and students who may need accommodations need to contact Disability Services office. Make sure that you have phone number and how to contact me on there. It's really helpful to write out key terms or some kind of lecture outline on the board or give it as a handout. Creating study guides is very, very helpful. Yes, we have a question.
So the accessibility statement in the course syllabus is the contact information. I know right now the standardized syllabus, correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, but that already includes the statement. Now it's including your contact information. We might be able to standardize that.
You were breaking up a little bit. I couldn't hear you very well.
So the accessibility statement that you're asking to be put into the course syllabus, that is already kind of standardized with our standard syllabi that everybody has to follow. But your contact information, I don't believe that that's part of that. Now but we might be able to standardize that. Sarah?
Yes, I think that we can change the syllabus template for spring and make sure that Carolyn's information is in there underneath the accessibility part. I'm trying to remember, it's in the syllabus. I'm trying to remember, is it also in students' rights and responsibilities? I can't recall.
I don't know, but I know the syllabus has a link. So
Okay. Yeah, let's make sure that Carolyn's info's in there. Thank you.
Great. That's awesome to know that it's already built in. Fantastic. Yay. Let's see. So creating study guides was the last one I think we left off with. Assigning advanced readings before the topic is due. That just gives students a chance to get an idea of what they're going to be talking about in class. A lot of students, even those without disabilities, repetition is so important. They're not going to really maintain that information unless they hear it multiple times and it's presented to them in multiple ways. Reviewing the previous lecture, again, that helps them make those connections. Most classes are building on each other, or they're building on the topic from the previous week. Using visual aids, it's very helpful. I think I mentioned earlier, I myself am a visual person. You could tell me about it all day long, but once I see it, then it's going to click. Giving assignments in writing as well as orally. This is really helpful for students that maybe have learning disabilities or who are on the spectrum. Having something more concrete in writing that they can refer back to is very, very helpful. And emphasizing important points, main ideas, key concepts, again, so that they're not having to figure out, okay, this is more important than this, because they don't know what they don't know. And so it's helpful if you can kind of give them an idea of where to focus their studying on, so they don't end up spending a lot of time studying something that's maybe not as important as something else in that particular lecture. Please leave time for questions, of course. Allow the use of smart pens. So smart pens are pens that have a recording device in them, and they have special notebooks that students can use. And basically what it does is as you're taking notes, it syncs it with the audio, what you're writing down. So when the student goes back to their notes, all they have to do is they tap the pen on whatever section of notes, and it'll automatically rewind the recording to that part of the lecture, which I think is really cool. I wish I had one of those when I was in college. We have some here at the Disability Services office if students want to try them out before they buy their own. So if you have a student that's interested, please send them my way. Speak distinctly and at a relaxed rate. This is something that I know I personally have to work on. I'm one of those people that starts talking a mile a minute. I have to rein it in and say, okay, hold on. It's not a race. Explaining technical language and terminology. Treating an individual with a disability the same way you would treat anyone else. That's a big one. Again, we want you to provide the accommodations they've been approved for, but at the end of the day, they're a student and they're expected to do the same things as every other student in that class. So we want you to treat them as such. And if you have issues, complaints, conversations, meetings with that student, issues that come up, make sure you document it. If you're not sure how to approach a student about a situation, let me know. I would be happy to talk to them with you, just one-on-one with the student. I will talk to anybody about anything. I recognize that faculty are the ones that have to see the students on a regular basis. And so if they need someone to be mad at, let them be mad at me. I don't want them to be mad at you. All right, so what we don't want to do, don't turn your back to the class when speaking. That makes it very hard for students who may have a hearing impairment to understand what you're saying. Please don't ever draw attention to a student's disability. Don't ever give any indication that they are receiving accommodations in front of the class. And don't assume that a certain profession or program is more suited to persons with disabilities or without disabilities. For those of you who don't know, my background is in vocational rehabilitation. So my background is employment for folks with disabilities, and I've put my foot in my mouth more than once. I've learned the hard way. Just because you think it might not be a good fit, and you're like, there's no way this person's going to be able to do that. Then they do. So that's not up to us to make that decision. That's up to the student. We just have to give them a chance. And as long as we explain to them what the expectations are, and we're very clear in the requirements that they need to meet, that's all we can do. Making medical judgments. I know this is really hard, especially if you work in a mental health or human services related field. You see this all the time. So you might see certain behaviors from a student and think, oh, well, they must have depression or they must be on the spectrum. Please don't do that. You never know. We're not medical professionals. We don't want to get wrapped up in that. Again, that's a very slippery slope. We don't want to go there. And don't feel apprehensive about discussing a student's needs as they relate to a program. So if you see them falling behind, talk to them about it. You don't have to insinuate that maybe they have a disability. It could be very obvious that they do have a disability. But you don't need to imply that the reason they're struggling is because of that disability. You can just say, I noticed that you haven't been doing very well in your tests. Is there anything I can do to help? What's going on? Because we never know what folks might have going on outside of school. And it could be disability related. It could not be. You never know. These are just a couple of resources that I like for folks to be aware of. Blue Ridge has an amazing teaching and learning department. They are fantastic, as I'm sure you all know. They are chock full of resources. They can help with captioning videos as well, making sure that your online classes are accessible. This second link is information about universal design, North Carolina Community College's disability services, the ADA, and the Journal of Post-Secondary Education and Disability. This is my contact information. I'm on the Hendersonville campus in Sync 125. That's my phone number and email address. Do we have any questions?
Go for it, Rose. I have like 20 questions, but I'm waiting for you guys to go first.
Well, if we're not supposed to put any words and images, why does it say any questions and images?
Because this is labeled as decorative.
Ah, got it. Okay.
Good question. That's a good one.
Well,
I was
I
wondering
can
if
do
anyone's gonna
decorative
notice that.
words. So I can do decorative words. Now I understand.
Yes. So if you do have something like that, like a Bitmoji, I know a lot of people like to use those, or maybe they don't. I like to use them. But make sure that you mark them as decorative when you're doing your alt text, for sure. Yes.
Other questions?
So yeah, just something kind of random. You remember the little driver's speedometer thing that we used to get? I remember you mentioning something about that before, if something was accessible or not. If you said that's going away or everything has to be green by the end of the year or something.
Yeah, so Ally was scheduled to leave Open LMS, was scheduled to leave our LMS. As a college, we decided that the new product that the state chose for our LMS was not meeting our needs. And so we actually extended our contract with Ally and are paying for it directly now because we really actually like the speedometers. And so, so you'll continue to see those through the year. And we're actually working with other colleges in the state to see if we can get a group rate to continue using them. We've been a little concerned around the replacement product because it doesn't scan files. It doesn't dig into files. So any kind of PDF that you attach or PowerPoint or doc, it's not going to scan those. And that's the main purpose that we had in, you know, in having a scanning software in the LMS, was to look at the things that teachers are uploading. Ally still does that. The argument is that it doesn't do a very good job. And what the state, this is more than you probably want to know, but what folks like me across the state have said in response to the state's folks that look at distance learning is something is better than nothing. And Ally actually does give us a starting place to have conversations around accessibility. So we're continuing with Ally. There is no hard deadline on when you have to have all greens, but what we are going to do is some audits this year. I've talked with Kevin, and in addition to just looking at reports that we can look at the LMS administrator level, we're also going to go in and do some auditing and just dig in and see like how accessible is this course really? Because sometimes something might get a good score, right? It might look green, but it's not green. And so that's something that you do really have to do some manual checking to get a true sense of how accessible courses are. Long answer. Other questions?
You know, I can never shut up. So, just so you have this awareness, I mean, because I know Aaron and Carol, Dustin, you guys may not be aware, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this or not, but Zoom has a plugin for an interpreter.
Oh,
So
cool.
if you have, I mean, you guys have some deaf coworkers, so I mean, kind of spread the word. If you have Zoom and you want to chat with your coworker, also they your coworkers on campus have a video relay, so you can just call them directly, an interpreter will pop up, leave a voicemail, same as like anything else. But if you're wanting to have a meeting with like a student via Zoom or something, because you don't have an interpreter sitting right there in your room, and obviously you guys probably don't have video relay computers in your room, the easiest thing to do is to get access to that plugin, and an interpreter will pop up and be sitting in one of the squares and interpret everything that you say, and it's through Sorensen. Now, that being said, it is an option. It's not always fantastic. So sometimes you end up waiting 10 or 15 minutes for an interpreter to show up. And then they say, Rose, we can't hear you, or the sound is cutting out. You sound really distant. I just can't handle this. And then they kind of hang up. So it is, but it is an option. Okay.
Great. I need to look into that more, Rose. Thank you. Carolyn, can I ask some tough questions?
Please, yes.
All right. You talked earlier about students being responsible for advocating for themselves. And one of the challenges I've experienced in large and small settings is poor self-advocacy.
Yes.
How can we best support students who are still learning to advocate without drawing attention to their disability? And in order to ensure that they're getting the accommodations that they're entitled to?
That is an excellent question. Oh, and I don't know that I have all of the right answers for it, but I think one of the things we can do is be as open as possible to students, try to be non-judgmental, convey to them that you are someone they can talk to if they're having difficulty, you know, that there's nothing they can say that's going to make you think, oh, they're not a good fit for this program, and really just convey to them that you want to help and that you're there to help them succeed in any way you can. There's no way to force someone, obviously, to have that conversation with you, but I think the more open you are, the more accessible you are. Hopefully, as they get to know you, they'll be more comfortable talking to you, and when something comes up, they'll come talk to you. When you're mentioning other resources like tutoring or counseling, throw disability services in there with it. That way you're not calling anybody out and saying, oh, I think you have a disability. You need to get down there and get some accommodations.
Mm-hmm.
But if a student says something specifically to you, like they're having a hard time finishing their tests on time, or they're having a lot of anxiety around testing in a large group, something really specific, you can say, well, you know, there's nothing I can do about that without an accommodation letter, but you can always talk to disability services and see if that's a route that could help you with that. You don't have to imply that they would qualify for disability services or not. You can just say that it's out there, it's an option, and then they can share with me whether or not they do have a qualifying disability. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, of course, my follow-up is, well, how do I qualify? I'm 30. I've been out of high school forever. I don't have any testing. I'm pretty sure I've had a learning disability my whole life.
Well, in that situation,
They love me. I'm so good at asking.
No, I get this question a lot, actually.
I know.
So this is really helpful, and a lot of folks think that if they don't have a learning disability that's been diagnosed recently, or they don't have any testing, they're not going to qualify for accommodations, and that is not true. I can give a lot of the same accommodations for a mental health diagnosis that I can for a learning disability. So if someone has really bad anxiety or some other mental health diagnosis, they could still qualify for extended time and separate setting for testing. So I would encourage them. Most people are seeing a doctor for something. So when folks come in my office and they say, well, you know, I had an IEP in high school, but it's been a while, you know, da da da. I say, well, are you taking any medication for anything? Are you seeing a counselor for anything? And 95% of the time, the answer is yes, and we can work with that.
So, yeah, so I have another question. You mentioned not every disability is something obvious, right, or seen. Can you name some invisible disabilities, some things that you see regularly, just to kind of get them on our radar?
Yeah, absolutely. So autism, ADHD, learning disabilities, almost anything mental health related, anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, bipolar, autoimmune diseases. A lot of times certain visual impairments may not be obvious if someone isn't using a cane or a guide dog. Hearing impairments may not always be obvious if the person doesn't have an interpreter with them or isn't wearing hearing aids or something like that. Those are probably the ones I see the most.
I have more questions, but I'm waiting for somebody else to ask a tough question.
Anybody have any program specific questions or any issues they run into, like related to the kind of class they teach or anything?
Ooh, Rose has her hand up again. Good.
I told you I'm that student. Carol knows I've always got something to say about something. So yeah, our program, we often get students that are either special needs and here you need to learn sign language. So they get sent to interpreter ed and it's like, okay, you can learn sign language. Yes, go for that. You're going to be held to the same standards as everybody else. I understand that you're elderly or you have something going on and your hearing is going to eventually disappear. Take classes. Great. No problem. Becoming an interpreter? Maybe. Yeah, and I say maybe because that is part of our standards in our class. I mean, in our field. So I actually have an email that I send students about this, and it's like, if you can check all these boxes according to the standards of practice, then yeah, you can do that. So we oftentimes get students that are deaf or hard of hearing, and they're wanting to become a certified deaf interpreter. So that is a possibility. Right now, I have a student that is doing that. But for them to become a certified deaf interpreter, I mean, they have to hit a level of ASL that is going to take years for them to accomplish. So, but because there's such a visual, I mean, you got to think about other countries, they have deaf people that come into the United States. So it's not ASL, it's whatever their language is. So if me, Rose, shows up for an interpreting job and I'm like, oh, this is Mexican sign, or this is, you know, Russian sign language. Like I may not be able to interpret that, but if you bring in a certified deaf interpreter, they have such a way of being able to visually gesticulate out that communication to relay it to me in ASL, and then I can bring it to the doctor or whoever it is I'm speaking to that happens to be hearing. So Yeah, send the students on, but I mean, their level of accomplishment might just depend on what it is that they are able to accomplish, like you said, make it accessible and they can do it. And I've loved putting my classes in ASL because it throws the hearing kids all off. They're like, what? And it's like, well, you can't say anything because you said this is what you wanted your career to be. So this is more exposure to ASL for you. But when it comes to like deaf blind, again, we end up working with deaf blind, but a blind student, I mean, I have to be able to tell them that they can take such and such a test with or without accommodations. And it's just the nature of our field. So if I have a blind student that wants to become an interpreter, it's like, how much vision are we working with here? So yes, everyone can. To what level?
Everyone can try. Yes. And I think it's great that you send out those technical standards. If your program doesn't have technical standards already posted or provided to students, please consider doing that. That's going to save you a lot of heartache in the long run, especially if you come across one of those situations where maybe a student just isn't realistic about their own abilities and they're saying, no, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And then you get to a point where even with accommodations, they're not able to do it. You can fall back on those technical standards and say, look, this is what you have to do to work in this field, and I can't give you a pass on that. And as long as they know going into it, that's the expectation, then, people are allowed to make poor life choices. As much as we hate it for them, that's their right,
All right, I got another question. Really, it's just, maybe I'm splitting hairs a little bit. Your point about not drawing attention.
Mhm.
I think that as an instructor, I'm pretty stuck when I have students with extended or separate testing situations. I'm not drawing attention, but the situation's drawing attention to it, right? Do you have any recommendations for us in that moment of how do we talk about it? What do we do? Do we just not say anything? Like if a student says, where are they going? Like, what do you do?
Right. So like you said, sometimes a situation is going to draw attention to it no matter what, and you can't control that. I mean, that's just how physics works, you know. But I think when I'm talking about not drawing attention to it, if you're talking about a test that's coming up, you don't want to say, oh, hey, Molly and Sally, what do you guys want to do about your extended time in separate setting for this next test? You don't want to say that in front of the class. You want to have that conversation with them privately prior to the test, how they want to handle it. And then that's really up to you guys. If you want them to come in early, stay late to get that extended time. If you want them to test at a different time, different day, that's really up to you. But definitely talk to them one-on-one prior to the test. And if other students notice they're gone, then say, I don't know, that's none of your business.
Yeah. Justin, I'm going to put you on the hot seat for a minute. I know this was problematic last year over at TCC. We had a number of students in that freshman class, and I'm wondering do you know how it's looking right now for fall?
Well, this fall with our incoming class, I presented the option of testing accommodation and sort of plugged Carolyn in the background and being like, there's this person that you could contact if you're having concerns. And, there's been a couple students who've like independently, approached me and taken the initiative to be, like you were saying, the self-advocates. And I'm like way proud of those people for, putting themselves out there. Yeah, I mean, I think last fall there were quite a few more people who I think more actively were the self-advocates, in a way that I'm kind of still getting a sense of the people who haven't, advocated for themselves yet. We're sort of still getting to know them as a class collectively, I think.
Yeah.
I did have kind of like a sort of, I don't know if it's a technical question for Carolyn. I had one of the students, she had approached me and, we were talking about test taking strategies and things like this. And she, was kind of describing to me in the last couple of weeks of her studying, I guess, she's talked about the noise canceling headphones as being this strategy that she's found to sort of help her focus and sort of take out a lot of this sensory noise. while she's doing practice questions and things like that. And she had asked me directly in an email today that was basically like, is this something I would have to talk to Carolyn about and kind of communicate with her office? Or is this something that you and I could negotiate together? And I said, I'm not really sure, but I'm actually going to go to this meeting here in like an hour. So maybe I can directly ask the group here. So thanks for putting me in the hot seat, Sarah. I know that I don't normally speak up, but so Carolyn, what would you say about that? You know, something like I asked her specifically, I said, well, when you say noise canceling headphones, is this something that is wired or can be connected to Bluetooth or just sort of a standard earplug? Because, you know, I think the other stuff in terms of like testing security and things like that, I didn't know how to maybe approach the response here.
So I would say for students, when in doubt, go through my office, because they may not every instructor is going to be as understanding and willing to work with them. So if it's something they feel like they really need, I would say come through my office. Now, if they do want that kind of accommodation, I'm going to tell them that it has to be earplugs or it has to be strictly just noise canceling headphones. So they can't be wired, they can't have Bluetooth, they can't be connected to anything. I have some headphones in my office they're welcome to use. I also have earplugs. I actually had a student at my previous school who wanted to listen to the radio and he wanted to stream it. We said, absolutely not. You cannot be connected to the internet. But if we have a little AM FM radio, and if you want to listen to that, you can do that. So we can work with it. But yeah, we definitely want to make sure that the integrity of your test is maintained.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, now that I'm looking at my email, actually just basically sent me a link to Apple AirPods, and I'm like, well, I don't, probably not. I do have noise canceling headphones too, and you know, disposable earplugs. You know, we have an exam on Monday, but kind of presented to me sort of last minute here. But I think, you know, I'll definitely direct her to you specifically, but in the short term, maybe have those other things available to her and talk about limits to the noise canceling AirPods, I guess, though.
Absolutely. And if it has to do with, protecting the integrity of your test, that is your prerogative. And if she feels like that's not fair, she can come talk to me about it. And I'm going to tell her the same thing. But, you know, AirPods are not a reasonable accommodation.
Sure. Yeah, thank you.
Rose, what you got?
Well, I'm going to kind of tag in Carol for this. We have a meeting coming up on Monday at 1 to specifically bring up the nursing department and the need that you guys brought to us last year. And when I say us, I mean Faculty Senate, which I guess is them because I'm no longer involved, which is why I'm tagging Carol because she's there. But yeah, I'm going to pretty much show up to the meeting and like brush my hair and hope everything works great. Not literally, I'm not going to really sit there and brush.
And Julie will also be there so she can speak well to the nursing element, Justin.
Yeah. So basically my point is I just want to let you know that the accommodation issue that the nursing department has brought to us on Transylvania campus is really being looked at. And I'm sorry it's taken so long. It's just like we literally had to go through the hiring process to get Miss Levine. So, I mean, we needed to consult an expert and we found her. So
yeah, it is at the top of my list, I promise.
Yeah.
Working on it. And I know how important that is and how hard it can be. And there's definitely some nuances when it comes to the nursing program. I worked very closely with the nursing program at my previous college, so I'm hoping to do the same here because I get it. It's not the same as, you know, maybe a general ed class, and there's things that we need to be cognizant of, and we're going to try and make it work.
Yeah. Guys, I'm going to have to leave because I have class starting in 10 minutes, and I just wanted to be like, thank you for all this information. Appreciate it. And you guys have a good day.
Thank you for all your wonderful questions.
Bye.
So I have another question. You made the suggestion to not make medical judgments, and I totally agree and get that in spirit. And I know that sometimes I see behaviors that tell me that a student may be anxious or on the autism spectrum or depressed. And it's very challenging for me in that moment to not want to try to do something that is conducive for their health and well-being in my course, right? So, am I a bad teacher, bad person breaking the law if I offer more structure or suggest some pacing of an assignment or something, that whatever that accommodation or suggestion would be. If I would be doing that for any student, whether or not they have accommodations, isn't that just responding to the individual needs of a student?
Absolutely, yes. And I should have been more clear about that. When I said don't make medical judgments, I mean, you know, we don't want to jump to conclusions and assume, oh, this person has this diagnosis and therefore they're not going to be able to do this, or they're not going to be able to do that.
Okay.
But if you would do it for any other student, please do it.
Yeah.
If you think it's going to help, you know, you see them more often than I do. You see what their learning style is. Everybody learns differently, regardless of disability status. And most instructors are going to be very cognizant of that. You're going to notice those little things, and every class is different. So you may structure things differently for this class than you did last semester. And that's great.
So we have a little latitude there.
Oh, yeah. Yes, yes. The big thing is just not excluding someone because you think they may have a diagnosis, or preventing someone from participating because they might have a diagnosis.
Thank you.
I have a question, maybe the elephant in the room. If I observe a student with the kind of behaviors that Sarah was talking about, they have no accommodation on record. I've gotten no notification from you. Do I just let them continue to either be a disruption to the class? Do I involve somebody? I mean, do I ask you to come and just observe the class, even though I know you can't step in unless they self-disclose? Just kind of where would we involve you with someone who has not come forward with an issue that they have talked to you about?
That's a good one. And I'm sure one that you guys probably see a lot. So I'm also part of the behavior assessment team, and we do see these kind of disruptive behaviors, and it may be linked to a diagnosis, it may not. And a lot of times students who maybe are higher functioning academically won't register with my office until, unfortunately, something goes wrong. So treat them like everybody else. They are not allowed to disrupt the class like everybody else. They have to be respectful. They can't intimidate peers. They can't, I mean, they're held to the same standard as everyone else. So if you would submit an incident report or a behavior report for someone else, do it for them too. And if they want to come forward and say, yeah, I think maybe I need some help, but there's not an accommodation I can give them that says they don't have to abide by that code of conduct. So
Thank you.
Aaron, I want to give you a fair opportunity. Everybody else has had a chance to ask. Got anything?
Not one question.
Said the guy.
Yeah.
He didn't know he was coming to the session.
I mean, I get accommodations, but the way that the class is set up, it's really built for students to really succeed. So there's already plenty of time. All the quizzes and tests are open book, and they're online. You can do them at your own pace. So they're really, built to allow the students to succeed as far as like test taking goes. If they need it, if I get an accommodation for extra time, I do give them another like time and a half, yeah.
I'm actually glad you said that, because there are some classes where you might get accommodations that don't apply to your class. Like if your tests aren't timed,
Right.
you don't have to worry about an extended time. And if you're teaching an online class, you don't need to worry about separate setting because they're taking their test out.
Right. Yeah. Well, they're timed. They're just, but I give them ample, like a lot. They get a lot of time, so I just add the half onto it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing what you do.
And I do want to point out, like Erin teaches a course that some students are really anxious about, right? Public speaking is a course that students would want to avoid, and students who may have anxiety around public speaking you can't have an accommodation to not do the thing that the course requires you to do, right? Like, you're never gonna get accommodation that you don't have to give any speeches in this class. Right? Like, that's not a reasonable accommodation for a public speaking course. But it could be a reasonable accommodation for a course that's not focused on that particular skill, right? Like, maybe they have an alternative if they have severe, you know, anxiety issues. Maybe they don't have to do public speaking in another course. Is that accurate, Carolyn?
Mhm. Yeah, at the end of the day, it really comes down to the instructor's discretion and what you feel like is necessary for the course. And if you feel like this accommodation would fundamentally alter that, let me know. Because like I said, when I write those accommodation letters, they're meant for all their classes for the entire time they're at Blue Ridge. And so it may apply in one class and not another.
I want to take a minute and just share with you all. I'm gonna take over the screen for a hot second and share with you all. This is the bottom of the syllabus template for fall. I went ahead and added, and I highlighted it just so you can see it really clearly. I've added the disability services coordinator, your name, your email, your phone number, and your location. So that is now part of, this is our very long syllabus template. So when faculty re-access this for second 8-week courses or spring courses, we'll rename it for spring. That information will be in there, Carolyn.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Perfect.
It's nice to have power. I can just go right in and do that. No, yeah, this is something that I help Kathy maintain, so I'm happy to do that. So, great.
And students don't have to physically come to my office if they want accommodations. It doesn't matter what campus they're on. I can meet with them virtually over the phone. We can do all that paperwork electronically. So if, you know, transportation's an issue, or I don't want that to ever be a barrier for them.
That's great. Well, I appreciate that we had time for questions, because we did have some really good questions from folks besides just me trying to poke holes. No, thank you so much, Carolyn, for the time. Thanks to all of you for attending. I've got an email that I'm about to hit send on that will include a PDF of the presentation, as well as an invitation to do a quick eval. So with that, we're gonna probably get going. Hope y'all have a wonderful afternoon/evening. It's almost Friday. Thanks so much. Bye, y'all. Look for my
All right, thank you.
puns. I gotta get punny before tomorrow morning, Carol.
Puns.
Puns. All right, bye, y'all.
Bye.